British Grand Prix is a Formula One race that takes place annually in the United Kingdom. It's been a regular event here on the F1 calendar and in fact has a very rich history dating back to the first season of Formula One in 1950. The race has been held at various locations over the years, but its current home is at the Silverstone circuit in North Hampshire, England. Silverstone is not only known for its high-speed corners, but also its many iconic moments, such as Schumacher versus Hill, Verstappen versus Hamilton, as well as Nigel Mansell's dominance. Some past winners of the event include Max Verstappen, Lewis Hamilton, Nico Rosberg, Sebastian Vettel, Mark Webber, Fernando Alonso, and many more, with Hamilton winning 7 races here in his career. The real question is, will Lewis be able to reclaim the throne here at Silverstone? Or will Max Verstappen continue his streak of dominance here in 2023? Let's find out. All right, hope you guys are having a great week. We are at Silverstone for the Britain GP, and let's go ahead and firstly talk about qualifying. So we get another wet condition day for qualifying, which gave us all sorts of craziness. And you can tell I'm wearing the orange here. Things were pretty good for McLaren. Firstly, kind of right off the bat, there was a couple of wet spots, couple of spots on the track that were not favorable conditions. And so we saw some slipping a little bit, notably Hamilton spun it into the gravel early in the session. And then notably Magnussen's engine shut off as well, and that was just kind of came to a full stop, and they're like, what's going on? Just kind of lost it there. And then Verstappen hits a part of the pit entry as people were coming into the pits after Magnussen's car issues, and so he hurt his front wing, but wasn't necessarily a crazy tough fix there. Bottas lost power, and so that's kind of 2 people that we get kind of that lose out on this session because of car issues. And then Perez notably misses Q3 for 5 races in a row, which is crazy. And we actually had some time to kind of hear from the team manager at Red Bull, and he had some very interesting things to say regarding Perez's recent struggles.
Yeah, he's got the pace today. He got a car that was easily capable of being on the first or second row. He was matching Max's times. Stay in the white lines. Strike 1, strike 2. Checo, just stay in the white lines. Strike 3, and that was it.
And so if I'm Perez, like, the pressure's on, man. This guy is all over my rear, and you know he should be, because you kind of botched it. Like, the past several races, you just have not qualified well. And so he's got to fix that, because you can't be finishing that low in qualies when you got such a strong car. But anyways, craziness happened. McLaren, right? Lando and Piastri are seeing some success and some pace. And for me, really, I am thinking McLaren in recent races has had pace when there is wet conditions, and then it hasn't necessarily carried over to the race. We see in the past couple races that's held true. And so when I'm seeing them up in the grid, I'm like, wow, this is awesome. Whenever there's a wet day, I'm like, let's look out for McLaren. They're really good in the wet. And so we'll see how their race day kind of comes to be here, and how they finish out there. But Lando and Piastri both running at the top of the grid with 0:0:0:0 left on the timer for the last qualifying session. We see Lando at the pole position in his home country, and the crowd's roaring when he crosses the finish line, and Max still has to finish his lap, and unfortunately Max squeaks in and gets the pole here in Silverstone. And so let's briefly just I'll throw up the results of qualifying, and then we're going to go ahead and get into the race. And so we see Max taking the pole position, as I mentioned, and we see the McLarens filing in second and third. Good on Oscar to kind of hang in there with Lando. There really isn't a huge discrepancy there between them, which we may have seen in prior qualifying runs, and so good on him hanging in there. Then we see the Ferraris 4th and 5th, Leclerc and Sainz, and then Mercedes right behind them, 6th and 7th. We'll see how those two teams battle it out tomorrow in the race. And then we have Alex Albon, Williams, finally in 8th. Alex Albon doing Alex Albon things. This makes me ask, where is Logan Sargent? It's awesome that Alex is up there, but where's his partner? I mean, come on, dude, get it together. Fernando, 9th. I think he can definitely do better. Where is Aston Martin at in recent weeks, right? That's definitely a conversation. They've really fallen off after the first several races. They've been not where they were before. Pierre Gasly rounding out the top 10. Then we see Hülkenberg, Stroll, Ocon, Sargent, Bottas. Then we see Sergio, as I mentioned, not making it to the next session, getting eliminated in Q1. Yuki, Zhao, De Vries, and Magnussen rounding out the 20 there. But looking forward to race day. Doesn't seem like we'll get any conditions. My main questions going into race day are, will McLaren stick on race day? And so that's a question that they maybe haven't done that in the past, carrying over qualifying attempts to the race. So we'll see that. And then really I'm eager to see Mercedes and Ferrari battle it out and see who gets into the top 3 on the podium among those 4. And then I'm also curious to how Sergio will come out tomorrow, and will he be able to crack a top 3 and make something happen there? And will people actually be challenging Max tomorrow? That would be really cool to see. But let's go ahead and get into race day, and hope it turns out to be a good one. So for this race weekend, we've got the first weekend of many with Brad Pitt and his friends and his crew here to film a movie, Formula One movie. And so I'll throw up a couple pictures here. We see on the formation laps, we will see Brad Pitt in an older Formula car. I believe it's a Formula 3 car. And they're just trying to film and get ready for their movie. Also, with some of the introductions and some other events throughout the weekend, he was also a part of those, and I'll put some pictures up here as well. But it's pretty cool. Pretty cool that there are some Hollywood eyes, more Hollywood eyes than maybe normal, and there usually is quite a few, on Formula One, which is cool. And so I'm eager to when that movie comes out, probably be a couple years from now, I don't know. Don't know too much details about the movie, but it's gonna be cool and different to see them running on these formation laps and a part of the weekends to come. But now let's get on to the start of the race. And so start of the race, we see some freaking orange in the front of the grid, and so let's see how they come out, right? And so start of the race, we see Lando get Max on that first little bit of the track, and then we see Oscar kind of making a shot at him as well. That was cool to see. A few people get wide during the start, but ultimately kind of a pretty clean start. There wasn't any yellow, there wasn't too much contact going on. It was a pretty clean start here in Silverstone. And then by lap 5, Max comes back and gets Lando. I wouldn't say there was much of a fight there. He flips on the DRS, gets by him pretty easily. The question is, will Lando be able to keep that gap relatively small throughout the race? Lap 7, Hamilton comes by, passes Alonso. Mercedes has been besting Aston Martin as of late. That wasn't something that was super consistent in the beginning of the year, but now Mercedes has made some adjustments. Aston Martin has not. Really, there's been this comparison between the two just because of similar setups and such with them being affiliated with one another. And so will Aston Martin be able to kind of get out of this funk? Let's see, right? But let's get into the mid-race after things kind of settle in. What were kind of the events in the middle part of the race? So the mid-race, things kind of settle in. There isn't too much craziness going on. And then we get to about lap 31. Russell's able to get Leclerc. Really, we see Leclerc falling. We see the Mercedes friends rising. Will Sergio be rising up a little bit, maybe making a pass here and there? In the middle part of this race, the McLarens aren't necessarily getting obliterated by Max, but they're not necessarily catching him. And so that's kind of what's happening in the middle part of the race. And then all of a sudden, we get a yellow. And so on lap 33, we get a yellow from Magnus. And if you do recall, he had issues yesterday during qualifying with his car and his engine just kind of shut off, right? And so his weekend ends in just an overall ball of flames, as we could say. His car kind of catches fire and his weekend is over. But this yellow comes a little bit later on in the race with 20 or so laps to go. And so notably when yellows happen, what happens? People slam in for the pits to get some tire changes. And so when this happens, everybody slams in, tries to get new tires. The strategy call was either go to soft tires or go to hard tires. And so really we see McLaren, everybody zigs, McLaren zags, trying to maybe catch a win, trying to do something different, right? And so McLaren went for hards, while Red Bull, Mercedes, and Ferrari went for softs. And that kind of represents the top part of the grid for this at this point in the race. And then we get a restart, and we're like, okay, what's gonna happen? And the question that a lot of people were having was, how long is it gonna take for McLaren's tires to warm up? Is this going to cause them to lose a few positions because they chose to go on hard tires? And what will be the ramifications of that decision? And so on the start, people are on their butts. They're kind of getting eaten alive. Not necessarily losing positions, but people are headhunting, going after them, right? And so their tires get to heat up. We see Mercedes versus McLaren kind of in these opening laps after the restart. And Russell and Hamilton are gaining on Piastri and on Norris. It's kind of a duo slamming together. Was kind of fun to watch. As a McLaren fan, I'm like, please stick the position, don't give it up, right? But the saving grace is that on the restart, there was no DRS allowed or available to the drivers, and so I think that really went into the favor of McLaren, giving them the ample time for their tires to heat up. But bouncing off of that, they do in fact heat up in time. McLaren's able to hang around, keep those positions, but not without a fight. Hamilton is going to pressure several times on Lando, but to no avail. He's inching, he maybe doesn't quite get him. And then by lap 44, Perez overtakes Sainz with a nice move, and then everybody is just jumping on Sainz's butt. And I mentioned earlier how Leclerc was falling, and now we see Sainz falling. Ferrari qualified better than these people, and then now they're falling back with their race pace. And so after Perez gets Sainz, we see shortly after Alex Albon jumps in, like doesn't even have a second to think about it. Alex Albon's going by him and joins the party, and then Sainz kind of loses 2 positions in the blink of an eye. And then right after that, Leclerc, his own teammates, jumping on his back and is able to execute a pass as well. And so there's really just this huge train of people, even behind Leclerc, that are trying to have a go here at Sainz. And so I don't know necessarily if something went wrong. Maybe his tires, I'm not sure, but he was getting eaten alive at that point. And then Gasly gets Sainz, but then Sainz is able to get a good run on exit and pass Gasly back up. By lap 45, 46, we do see Stroll have a moment. He ends up getting into Gasly and causes a little bit of damage, and Stroll is going to get a penalty, which we can address later in the results. And then by lap 46, Perez gets Alonso, and Perez continues his climb to try to get maybe a top 5 finish. At this point, in the race, I don't think he realistically has a chance at the podium. But let's go ahead and talk about the results and talk about how things kind of fell together here towards the end of the race. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and put the results up here. Let's go ahead and talk about it. So Max Verstappen gets his, I believe, his 6th win in a row. And so props to him for keeping that going, but not without some sort of fight this weekend. We see Lando getting 2nd, sticking that position. You see I'm in the orange today. It says go orange. You can barely read it because it's like up probably backwards for you guys, but good on McLaren. It seemed like their setup and the upgrades they've made have allowed them to stick in later in races and hang around at the top of the grid, which is super cool to see. Then we see Lewis, who was a really big climber today, make his way onto the podium. And then we really see 2nd and 3rd. We see 2 hometown drivers getting the podium here in Great Britain at Silverstone, so props to them. And then again, we see Piastri with his greatest finish in F1. He's able to finish 4th today, and so props to him on that. I'm sure he's going to really remember that drive for the rest of his career. And then we see George Russell kind of cycling 5th. He wasn't able to quite get Oscar today. He was on his butt quite a bit, but didn't quite execute that. Then we see Sergio working his way from the back of the grid, it seems like for the umpteenth time, and he's only able to get 6th. And it seems like a lot of these teams, Ferrari, Mercedes, McLaren, even Williams and Alpine, they're making adjustments, and you're seeing Sergio having a harder time to work his way back. It's like he's a little bit less overpowered than he once was, and so hopefully he's able to figure that out. And then we see Fernando 7th. I mentioned Aston Martin struggles in the past. I think they really need to make some fixes. I mean, they should be fighting for podiums, and here we see Fernando finish outside of the front 3 here for the second week here in a row. And then we see Alex Albon get 8th, and then Leclerc 9th, and 10th we see Carlos Sainz to round out the top 10. Ferrari qualified quite well, and coming off their weekend last weekend, you figured they'd try to be more in the front this week, but they weren't able to make that happen. Logan Sargent getting 11th. I was giving him a hard time as I was watching the race, but he was able to actually stick almost a top 10 finish. It would have been really cool to see him get some points, but hey, this is maybe building towards something for Williams. Excuse me. Then we see 13th, we see Hülkenberg. I believe Magnussen would probably be up there as well, fighting for points if he didn't have issues. We see Lance Stroll with that penalty, bringing him down to 14th. Then we see Zhou, Tsunoda, De Vries, Gasly, Magnussen, and Ocon kind of rounding out the 20 spot there. But I think it's unfortunate with the Alpines and kind of how their weekend ended up finishing up. And Magnussen as well, I feel like Haas has been competing quite well as of late. But I think it's a really great stepping stone for a lot of these teams. We see McLaren really showing up this weekend, and hopefully this is something that throughout the rest of the year they can bring to the table. So what did you guys think of the race? Let me know in the comments section below, and like and subscribe to Rhino Racing to see more motorsports content. I'm trying to chase 100 subscribers, so help me get there. And as always, have a great week. See you later.